3:31, and board members in attendance are Director Hafley, Art, Nelson, Bankus, and Milpacum. I do expect Directors Carey and Jenkins to join us during this meeting at some point in time, as soon as they can attend. Today we have a work session, and there is several items on the agenda. And this is a work session of the board, and I would request that community members follow the required professional decorum that is necessary in the boardroom to conduct our meetings appropriately.
You have reported credentials?
Okay, we do have several items on the agenda, and I just wanted to kind of let the board know that we do have a community meeting at 6 o'clock at Doherty for the Jenkins community. So we are under a time constraint today. So we need to, as best as possible, stick close to the timeline that has been identified out here. Going forth, in every board meeting or work session, Superintendent Gall would update the board and the community about what is the latest happenings at Jenkins Middle School.
So I'm going to do that for you right now.
Yeah, and so board members and community, this will happen on a periodic basis as best as possible, and I will transfer it. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Gall.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I want to start with an update. We will have a much more robust update for our community at Doherty at 6 o'clock. First, I want to give out a tremendous thank you. You should be extremely proud as board members of your staff, your community, your students. Every aspect of Colorado Springs has come to bear to help assist in the dislocation of the Jenkins 6th grade to Russell and 7th and 8th grade to Doherty. The staff were all there on Tuesday morning, ready to help pack boxes, move people out. The amount of attention to detail that has come to bear in such a short amount of time is laudatory and noteworthy. And as board members and community members, you should be extremely proud. I, am very thankful for the executive leadership team that has taken this project on. They all deserve shout out, but two specific names. Area Superintendent Darren Joyner in really taking this challenge on over the last couple of weeks when we thought that this might be an eventuality in doing that planning, and our Chief of Strategy, Nicole Ottmer, and really being the person behind the scenes that makes sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's. Every part of the community that comes out. I mean, I've seen folks from some of the companies that we have contracts with. I've seen faith-based organizations. I've seen individual parents who have just said, how can I help? And they've been going through our engagement team and Dr. Wise, and they've been able to help. It's been great. Pictures alone and words are not enough to express that thank you, and yet there is still work to come. Updates for our community that's paying attention through our Jensen Hughes contract that we have in place. We have now added a geotechnical engineer survey to that through CTL Thompson. They'll be subcontracted through the Jensen Hughes contract that we have in place. We have to understand exactly what has caused this. And again, not a structural engineer, but we need a soils team in here to understand, was it not built right the first time, or is it an issue with how close that wing is to the creek? So we have moved with great urgency to bring CTL Thompson on contract to be able to get that work, for us to get that full report to our community. We think it's critical that when we release that full report, we actually understand what caused this, such that we don't start to get camps of people who say, well, you should do this or you should do that. We have to get to the root cause, and we're excited that CTL Thompson is on board to be able to do that. Tonight's meeting, our info meeting for our parents at Doherty, will be split very similarly to how it was last Thursday. We will have a cast of leaders who will share information. There's a lot more detail to even the great detail that we offered last Thursday. And we'll be trying to use kind of a student vignette through each one of those slides. So if your sixth grader plays basketball at Russell, here's what that looks like. What we want to do is get our parents and our community thinking about those attention to details to make sure that we have them right for Friday. And then again, we'll have problem-solving stations after the information sharing for parents to get that exactness. If you're still not sure about your bus route, please go to the transportation table to say, my kid walks to school, what time do they need to be in the parking lot? Make sure that we help you do that. We are staying on our forecast that we appreciate the movement of our staffs at Doherty and Russell to accommodate our Jenkins team. I've been assured by both those school leaders that those two schools are ready for instruction tomorrow. I know that it's been a lot, and I appreciate the work that people have done. I'm very thankful for the thoughtful folks who decided to hire a moving company. I know there are still a lot of teachers who put stuff in their cars and drove it over as well. It has been tiring, it has been exhausting. Your schools, both Russell and Doherty, have been given extra funds for them to be able to support and celebrate your work. But we do intend on having a full day of instruction on Thursday for our traditional Doherty and Russell kids. Our Jenkins families will have an orientation night tomorrow on Thursday for orientation and school at both Russell and at Doherty from 4:30 to 8, and then the school will start again for them on Friday as we had previously forecast. For those staff that are listening, if you're still having a challenge on meeting any of those, please work with your school leader for us to be able to help support that with substitutes and/or central office staff to help assist in your class if you need that. These will be the information sessions that are out there again tonight. We'll also be introducing a little bit more of both Principal Heighton from Doherty and Principal Dubois from Russell to our Jenkins families. There'll still be that Jenkins experience at those schools, but we do want them to see that they're going into buildings that have very strong leaders and very high functioning systems in those places. Again, orientation tonight from 4:30 to 8. Orientation tomorrow night from 4:30 to 8. The expectation is that our staff will be there. I know there will be exceptions to that for people who had previously conflicts that will schedule through that. There will be somebody in a classroom to greet your student. The goal for our parents is to walk your child's schedule in those spaces and then ask the administration questions. What about this? What about that? I'm concerned about this. Get down to the detail that you need to feel safe, secure, and ready for instruction on Friday.
All right, now, am I?
That concludes my update.
Okay, thank you.
Any
And-
questions from the board?
Yeah, and I will have a brief comment to follow what Superintendent Gall shared. First, I want to thank the staff. I was at Jenkins yesterday morning, and it looked like the entire central administration staff had been displaced out there, and they were physically out there helping pack boxes, move the classroom supplies, furniture, and the scope of the operations and the move was extraordinary to see. Printers, I even saw a copy machine being moved out there, and we had movers, all of you, I saw every one of you out there, so thank you. It's an incredible lift. Sometimes we as board members don't understand the scope of the operations that is necessary to move school district, the instruction supplies, the furniture, the band instrument, all the athletics, and all of that was done really effectively, efficiently. So thank you for all of them, especially Dan Joyner, like what you mentioned, Superintendent Gall, and then our community partners who were there too. I saw a lot of parents and volunteers that were there that provided the food for the staff during that afternoon and the morning sessions. So thank you all for the move. And I'm glad that we moved with a great sense of urgency to hire a geotechnical firm to put in place. Just to let the board know where we are, and Superintendent Gall talked about it, there is going to be several layers of initial work that needs to be even completed over the next few weeks before we come to a point as to what are the options that the board needs to consider for that building going forth. our students are located in new buildings and their learning environment is going to be as best as possible, not disrupted. We are going to have the same faces, familiar faces, teachers teaching out there, but our students still need their own spaces, Jenkins, and going back into the Jenkins school at some point in time so they can have their familiar faces. So if the board, this is something that if the board is comfortable with, we need to return our students as quickly as possible. So in this case, we need to move with a sense of urgency to make sure that the next steps that are taking place, the surveys, the next operational aspects that Superintendent Gall is going to transparently communicate to the board at every board meeting and to the community what is happening. But at the same time, we follow an expedited procurement protocols to help speed up this process so we can get our students back into Jenkins as quickly as possible. And and I'll open it up for the board for questions and comments as well. Go ahead, Director Nelson.
I was thinking about tours, choice window, and so just wondering if we can be proactive on advertising on Jenkins' website that we'll still give you a tour. It's not so much about the building, it's the staff and the opportunities that you can get at Jenkins. I know my daughter's going into 6th grade, so that's on my mind of middle school and new adventure and just getting a feel for where they're headed in advance to help make those decisions and try
Excellent
and
idea.
be proactive so that we don't lose enrollment for people thinking it's just not really a viable option. It still is.
Yes, it is. We actually enrolled a family, it was either yesterday was Thursday morning, a new neighborhood family relocated from Denver and showed up to Jenkins, and we told them what time the shuttle would meet their walker, and they said, great, and they went down the enrollment office. So, yes, it's an excellent point for us to continue that in the choice window.
Thanks.
Has Jenkins had an open house for?
Yes, they already had their open
Okay.
house.
So this would be additional tours that you want
Yeah,
to.
just so people know they should still be continuing that well-worn path of Scott Freedom Martinez to Jenkins.
Okay.
And it's sort of, I guess, above and beyond. Maybe there are families that don't need that extra tour, but I know my husband was out of town the night of the open house, so it'd be nice if he could get in and just get a feel for the staff.
Yep. Any other questions from board members? Director Rock?
As parents, a parent contacted me and was concerned that they may have fallen off of the communication list as a Jenkins family. Has anybody been eliminated from the list because they have considered other options?
Yeah, well, we certainly don't intentionally drop people off. The D11 loop is Dr. Wise's, and if you can give me the name of the person, I'll make sure they're added. I think what happens sometimes is people change their email address or they change their phone number, and then the system doesn't work in a way that says you're not answering me anymore. So when you're out, you have to reestablish in. But if you have folks that aren't getting that information, I do have 100% confirmation from Principal Jakowski that every family is aware of these changes. And so if there are people who are missing the communications we're sending, we can close that gap as soon as we know who they are.
Thank you.
Anything else? Comments or questions on this? So Superintendent Gall, if it is possible, if you can and your team put together a timeline as to what we can expect, not only for the board, but also for the community, and bring it in front of the board at an earliest possible date.
Yes, we'll have that ready for the board for next work session. And once you all approve it, then we'll find a way to put it on the website and communicate it more broadly.
Okay.
And I'm gonna do that in a way that makes sense to the average reader. Like the difference between an architect and a construction company, and like we gotta do this in a way where we don't look like we're overcomplicating what is a very complicated situation. So we'll work with the board on making it digestible, because I'm not sure everybody understands the difference between a design build contract and having an architectural company and then having a construction company. We gotta make that in a way that looks, I don't wanna say looks, that is understandable by the people most impacted.
Okay. Thank you so much, and to the community that is watching, this is a high priority item for this board to ensure safe learning environments for our students, and we are going to move with expediency and urgency to fix this problem as soon as possible and return our kids back to that learning environment at Jenkins. And thank you again for all the staff for your incredible work, and the teachers too at each one of those respective schools to adapt and quickly pivot to new environments and new learning conditions. Thank you. With that, the next item on the agenda is going to be the mid-year data update. This is going to be the STAR data, and I'm going to turn it over to you first, Superintendent Carr, to set it up.
I'm going to hand the trustee clicker over to Dr. Colicky. The good news is we're still moving. The bad news is we want to move faster. The good news is, as David goes through the data, the schools that are most committed to implementing with fidelity on their USIP, on the district's instructional strategies, and using the resources provided have shown the most growth. And then we still have some challenge points there afterwards. But generally, we're still on track to where we were last year. This areas of concern still remain areas of concern, but we are seeing some schools move very quickly when really committed to their internal strategy. David?
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to walking through this with everyone, and had a chance to take a look. This is where we stand right now. So ELA at grade level, so that's meets or exceeds. We can interchange those terms. So at grade level or meets or exceeds, 44.7, 32.6. These are kind of familiar looking numbers at this point, right? So ELA is usually about 10% higher than math. When we look at median growth percentile, remember this is how do like students compared to a national sample using STAR. This is the same calculation that we use for the state. That sample is compared to a state sample. So they are equivalent with some important distinctions, and we're right in the middle, 52.6 and 50.6. This is really the takeaway from the slides that you took a look at. When we look at year over year comparisons, this is where the good news is, and this is where the challenge is. We can see that if we remember last year, we got that nice big bump from the fall up into the winter. And we kind of got a nice little stair step. So from 22-23, started here, stair stepped up 23-24. Now we need to continue that stair step up. And the big takeaway here is that our within year growth remains strong. It rivals last year, and we know what results we saw last year. However, year to year growth, which is really our systemic growth, which is really a reflection of our systemic approaches, is completely flat. So we're exactly where we were last year at this time. Our strategies continue to hold, are pointing in the same direction with math and ELA continues to work. Now we have to really dive down into deeper strategy, which Dr. Fry and Chief Tenkate will walk us through as well. Again, when we look at math, it's almost the exact same trend. So great, really strong within year improvement, but between year, we want to see those just nice steady steps up. We don't see, and we're at exactly the same place that we were last year. When we look at how we're strategizing these numbers and really looking to push our system forward, we look at this with both MGP and SGP. Just a really quick review here. SGP is a student growth percentile. Every student has a student percentile number assigned to them, and then for a school or a classroom or a region, we can take the median of those SGPs. So that's how those two acronyms work. What we are really looking at with all our goal setting is we want 54 or higher MGP, and that is really closing gaps. That's gap closure growth. And so 54 plus, that is 20 schools in ELA, 14 schools in math. We'll take a closer look at that in the next slide. What we want to really avoid and get these schools up into that 54 plus are the falling behind. That's below 49. In ELA, that's 16 schools. In math, that's 29 schools. Noted there 4 in the 30s and 7 are in the 30s for math. 30 is significant, significant falling behind. If you think about we're running a marathon, 50, 52, you're kind of holding the pace in the middle of the pack. 54 and above, you're starting to pass a few. Below 49, you're getting past. We want to not have that situation. Maintaining is where we're at 16 in ELA, 10 in math. So when we take a look at this across schools, remember we set goals in 2 different ways. We want to get, we have been very successful. I would say this was one of the biggest wins of last year that we are still reaping benefits from, and that is growth is a byproduct of percent passing, meaning we are setting goals for performance and enjoying the benefits of growth. So I was just in a data step back meeting yesterday, and again, absolutely committed to the culture of looking at individual students, where they're at, what areas can we push, and where can we see that, where can we see each student move up into the next performance band or better. So that is one strategy that is paying off that we are continuing to use and refine. So on the left-hand column, you see those schools that are increasing percent passing by 5%. That is a goal for the district. Several of those schools have eclipsed that number. Edison, I want to really point out Mitchell in ELA, that's 13%. So as you're increasing that number of percent passing by 13% to 11 to 10%. That's our number one goal. Growing the top, growing the head, getting more students into the green and blue. And the other way that we set goals is that 54 plus gap closure, and you can see which schools are closing that gap. So again, noting that high schools, or secondary schools rather, are in bold. Aside from North, I realized 10 minutes ago that I did not highlight bold North there. So that is a secondary school in that next level up. So these are the schools, 13 schools met both district goals. Growing the top by 5% or more, closing the gap by a 54 or higher MGP. So that's great, 13 schools met both of those. When we look at kind of a really magical tipping point, schools at 50% or more, we start to get return on that investment in various ways. Once we hit that majority, you can see there, those are the schools that are 50% or above in their percent passing. In math, we see 12 schools meeting both sets of district goals. So you can see the list there, schools increasing percent passing and schools that are 54 plus gap closure. And then at 50% passing, the big takeaway from this slide is that this list is much shorter. So in math, we still need to continue to move more and more schools into that 50% passing and get more students functioning at grade level in math. When we take a look at watch list schools in both ELA and math, this is an area of concern that we are continuing to dial in resources towards and really strategizing around. So you can see ELA and percent passing went backwards, so down 4%. There are many factors that Dr. Fry will talk about there. That work is progressing forward. They are in their data. I sat in there yesterday and they are in their data doing those deep dives, getting their new staff up and running into that culture. But that culture is alive and well in Adams. But they did take a slide backwards in ELA, and that's really reflected in their ELA MGP at 33, which is concerning because that means that is a significant slide back. Galileo is holding steady, and we need that number to really start to pass, to really start to increase so that we start gaining ground on that gap closure. But we have a 23% passing, which is no change right at 50 MGP. Mitchell ELA is a great story, both in percent passing and MGP. I know we had Mitchell high MGP last year. What we were missing at Mitchell was higher percent passing. And we're hitting on both cylinders there, which is very encouraging. So up 13%, some of the highest growth, highest performance change in the district. When we look at math, Adams did have a 4% gain on math, but again, that growth is still relatively low. That needs to really start to hit that 54 and above. Galileo flat, and Mitchell up slightly, just about 1%. So that's reflected in the 45, losing ground a little bit at Mitchell Math. When we look at subpopulations, so these are the subpopulation categories that are on the SPF. The takeaway here is that, and there is a typo on the title, that should be about 11% below district, not 15% below district. So you can see it's the same trend, it's just compressed a little bit downward. You can see for FRL, some areas of concern are those SPED numbers of 10.7%, so about 11% passing. We're continuing to strategize around and work towards. And we have some powerful trends of those strategies paying off in very real and tangible ways. For example, Rudy in FRL, 56% passing. Jackson for our special ed students at 35%, and Odyssey and Minority it's at about 70% passing. When we look at math, again, similar trend. We're about 7 to 8% below the district, and again, very low percent passing rates for our special ed populations. If we want to reap the benefits of the strategies on the SPF, we have to see that number start to move up, which we'll speak to those strategies in just a moment. Some places that are bucking that trend and exceeding the district averages. You can see your Freedom on both FRL and SPED. Some really powerful strategies happening there and things happening there. And Chipeta Minority at 57% passing. So do we want to jump into Panorama right now, or do you want to do questions on?
Let's pause on school data.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or feedback from the board at this point in time? On the start at mid-year assessment?
I'm guessing that given our next presentation is about PD, that will sort of get into what our strategy is going forward, and
Yep.
so we'll cover that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Anything else, Director?
I'll note that the stagnant numbers are incredibly discouraging. And so I am curious, and it was commented on that we might hear about this later, but like hopefully we have resourced people well. I was at a school last week where they said that they had gone from 5 paras to 1, and I don't know if that's because of the numbers, ESSER going away, other grants going away, or hiring difficulties. It sounded like it was ESSER funds. So we've reduced schools that were doing better because of the supports they had, and now we've taken that away. But I just feel like this is, for all of those little wonderful numbers pulled out, we're incredibly stagnant. And so I'm curious what we are going to do to address that is different, or if indeed it's the PD we're going to double down on, because that gave us hope last year. But my concern is we aren't pulling Galileo, at least, out of their watch list situation. And I can only hope Mitchell and Adams are going to lift up enough. But can you give us some hope there?
Yeah, I won't use the word hope. I mean, the number one way to student achievement is access to high quality instruction, and everything we do is about improving the quality of that instruction. When children are further behind, that quality and time both need to be increased to make up that lost amount of time. I'll just say any high school, whether it's Mitchell or any other high school that's not at over 50% of the kids achieving, has even a greater challenge to overcome, because they are inheriting years of not having that consistent access to high quality instruction. I think the anecdote that you'll see, particularly from the PD slide, is that the PD is differentiated. It is getting greater traction, and it is on the unit, the district improvement plan. So we are all on board of how we are seeking to increase the quality of the instruction that we have. The numbers that you see are not different for us or any other school system that is in this 30% to 40% of kids that are on achievement. it's not a linear relationship that says, if I do X more, I will get X more in return. It is an exponential, actually an inverse proportion of how much more you have to put in. We are overstaffed in every building in this district according to the board-approved formula. A particular building that I think we're talking about from the same PTA meeting that came to my attention last week is overstaffed by a full FTE and is running well below the 25-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio. I'm not saying I agree that we should have 25 kids. I'm not saying we should disagree. That building is well overstaffed and over budgeted. The changes in ESSER have been minimally felt in our school system compared to neighboring school systems. One, because we have a strong Chief Resource Officer office that calculated it. And two, a lot of the money that we spent was actually operational. It wasn't really on instruction, so there weren't a lot of lost positions. I remind again the public that last year, when asked to find $4.5 million to balance the budget, we took that centrally to not impact schools. But are there enough adults to move? You could go back a bunch of slides to anybody that's on the average of 30% magically to 50 or 60%. There's not enough adults in America to solve that problem in that short a period of time. It's a long-term commitment to access to high-quality instruction. Every day, grade level learning objectives taught and met, and then when not met, retaught and corrected for. And anybody that's ever taught in a classroom knows you're immediately off scope and sequence when you do that, because one reteach screws up everything for the rest of the year. So I will ask the board that and again, these are mid-year data points for us to make the course corrections that we need to, particularly when you see them by school, it tells us where to spend more time. I think the question we will ask ourselves is, how quick do we want to get there? If we want to get there very quickly, I interviewed on this standpoint, and I'll say it again, all those ESSER dollars, not a school district in America made summer school mandatory for a child not reaching state level objectives. Do we want to get to policies that say if your child doesn't read on third grade, by the end of third grade, they have mandatory summer school every year until they're caught up again? Like we have put conditions in place very thoughtfully, centrally, and distributed very intentionally at school level by staff members. This is no condemnation of staff isn't doing what we ask them to do. The challenge in America for children that are behind is how do you catch them up? There isn't an extra half a year built in. So if the number one way to student achievement is access to high quality instruction, you should see and feel that as we get to the second half of this brief, and that's why we set them up this way. But from a policy perspective, we have said that we are going to bring a middle school kind of grading standard to the Board of Education. How hard does the board want to lean in on when are you ready to go to high school? Mitchell or Coronado? And then what is the expectation that you're there? Anecdotally, we're happy to report that the cell phone policy has less D's and F's. But that's still a slightly defeatist way to measure the success of a policy, is we have less D's and F's. How do we get to a place that says we have more kids graduating faster, sooner, smarter? So I so appreciate the comment, because the peaks are where the peaks are and the valleys are where the valleys are. We can program around the valleys. The valley is summer learning loss for kids that are far behind. They slip further faster. And we will be coming with a summer school recommendation. But do we want to stop making this an opportunity and start saying our job is to produce grade level learners? And to do that, we gotta raise the valley. And I think that would be a great place for the board to direct the administration that says, how do you do that? But from a access to high quality instruction, you're gonna see some great data that's showing that we have the leading information and data points that say that we're moving in the right direction, yet the challenge is still very real, very real.
You done with your questions, Director?
Think on that for a while, yes.
Okay, Director King.
You had mentioned kind of anecdotally that when you take a look at the schools that are doing well in math versus the schools that are not doing well in math, you feel like there's some correlation between, the amount to which they're kind of making full use of the programs that we have for them, such as Eureka Math.
Mhm.
So I'd be curious to know just kind of what specific metrics you're looking at to think about kind of program uptake. And then there are other things that this district has been doing as well. Maybe some of this will be in the PD presentation. Instructional empowerment is the other one that comes to mind. What are, as we kind of are looking at this mid-year data and thinking, okay, do we stay the course? Do we need to course correct? What are some of the metrics that you're using internally to think, are these programs delivering what we need them to?
Yeah, we can supply some more information. For Eureka specifically, we have an end of module test that we measure when it was taken and the efficacy of that. And we don't have the slide available right now, but it's running the same 0.8 correlation between those that are on scope and sequence and using the module to inform their instruction is giving an 80% correlation to what we're seeing on STAR data. So we are using metrics like that to see how that works. Most of it comes anecdotally from the building leader on what they believe is or isn't happening. We also use the 5Es data that helps us inform if teachers feel that they're supported by the strategy and whether or not they feel that it's a collaborative learning environment inside their building. That's usually a good, and we've done this before, kind of the red to orange to yellow to light green to green way that 5Es measures. It's normally a good leading indicator that the first thing you'll start to feel is that the team feels like they have a plan, and then the data starts to show after that. I certainly don't mean to simplify this. I mean, the number of variables that go into student learning are so many, and one of the things that we're spending a lot of attention on the schools that weren't on that list is student mobility. We try, and David's done a lot of work, David and his team, on measuring cohort experience. I believe at the beginning of the year, we briefed the CMAS data that showed kids that stayed in the school for a year or longer outperforms kids that jump around schools. Now, again, I can't simplify this and say, parents, stop over choosing, because sometimes life forces those choices. But those variables have a lot of influence on that. But we do have the Eureka data. The CKLA data for the pilot that we've done has also shown some very promising results. The IE results stand for themselves as well, that the intensive support schools and the accelerated agency schools, where we can match the rubric of the learning walk to the data, the correlation is very clear. If you can, and again, I'm going to oversimplify this for the conversation. Teaching is probably the hardest, most unsung profession in the history of mankind. Teaching kids that are far behind is even harder. Teaching kids that are far behind when there isn't a coherent strategy or staff to do it is nearly impossible. Buy into the school's USIP, buy into the things that we provide for you, and then we can make them better. Arguing against them in the face of failure that you see doesn't get us to a place where we can actually move the system. So I appreciate the ask for more metrics, and we'll be sure to provide them on the ELA side as well. And David, if we could get that end of modules thing, we'll include it in the Mars report, if Nicole's paying attention over there, for the board to see that correlation between, if you use Eureka, you'll get better correlation to what you taught to the STAR data, and that same 0.8 correlation runs into CMAS as well. And again, if I give you 80% of 80%, I know that's not 100%, but a 0.8 correlation is good or not good.
It's very good. It's a
Very
beautiful, it's a beautiful scatter
Educational
plot.
data, that's real good.
It's a beautiful scatter plot. I love that
Can
thing.
I ask one quick follow-up question? Do you have any ability to adjust or interpret the data in light of the cohort that's coming in? So when I look at, I don't think the slide numbering is exactly the same, but your watch list schools for ELA and math, and you show Adams and Galileo and Mitchell, and Adams is down 4% in passing. One of the questions that immediately occurs to me is there something more challenging about this particular incoming cohort of students? This is something we deal with all the time where I teach, where we're constantly trying to adjust, okay, what can we say about this particular incoming class? Oh, this is the hardest class that we've seen in the history of the institution. Great, how are we going to adjust? So when you look at the data, do you have the ability to make any kind of adjustment or think through, okay, here's what we can say about the class, here's how that's going to inform the data?
Yeah.
Is there anything you can speak to on that question?
Not off the top of my head, but we do run cohort models like that. I didn't here because I just wanted to give a snapshot of what they're looking at on the ground. But yeah, when I did that for the CMAS results, it did show a significant difference. So I'd be happy to run that analysis. Yeah, I think that's a great, especially at all three. I mean, at all three are highly impacted by mobility, and so that would be helpful.
Are you done? Since we are on this slide, and going back to that slide, last year there was some concern about the staffing at each one of those schools. That's why we implemented that additional funding for these schools. Are those schools now at least adequately staffed? We don't have the situation as it existed in Adams, if I remember last year, when we didn't have adequate staffing and stuff.
So it's much, much better.
Okay.
There are still a few positions that have long-term subs in, but right now, one classroom. And so vastly better. I think this goes a little bit to Director Carey's question. We're really seeing differences across the staff. So with 12 new classroom teachers, we have such different levels of experience. And we have put a lot of intensive coaching supports into Adams specifically. We have a teacher who's receiving extensive support and has really leaned in and asked for that and loves that support, and has gone from a teacher who was very struggling at the beginning of the year to one with among the highest growth in the district in her STAR scores. And so we're working on mindsets with teachers to be more accepting of coaching, because we are finding that the coaching really is helping to move the needle on student learning, and also on teacher skills and strengths and how they're feeling about their success as a classroom teacher. So that, I think, is a piece of the Adams story. The data is not yet representative of kind of the evening of things out and the settling of things. To have almost every classroom have a certified teacher is that's so much more settled than last year. So we anticipate the data will start to look better.
Well, that's good to hear, that the support that we provided to those schools are having an impact. So I'm assuming, and this goes without saying, I'm sure each one of the area superintendents and their respective schools are doing a deep dive into that mid-year data and
Yes.
ensuring what are the next steps that need to be taken.
Yes.
And if there are areas of concern in a specific classroom or anything like that, those are all being addressed as appropriately as possible between now and April. So some of the schools that, especially last year, were on the threshold of dropping to priority improvement or turnaround, we don't get a slide back with those.
That's the goal. And so we're looking at the school level data, the teacher level data, but then also individual student data to make sure that they have the right supports if their data isn't showing the progress that we want.
Okay.
Sherry, do you want to quickly summarize the last K-12? Because Dr. Malpackham's question about tracking and action planning off of this data was the crux of the work you wanted to do.
Yes. Gosh, I'm thinking back quickly to the last K-12. We spent a lot of time digging into reteaching plans with principals and having them go deep into their STAR data, their Eureka module data, in some cases even their DIBELS data for early literacy. And what we asked principals to do in order to prepare to lead a reteaching conversation with a teacher or a PLC or grade level, especially one who might be struggling with their data a bit, was for the principal first to imagine that they were the teacher of those students and to plan that reteach themselves. And the reason that we ask them to do that is we want them to be able to support that struggling teacher, PLC, grade level, in that reteach conversation as if these were a class of their students as well, and they're doing side-by-side planning with the teacher at very deep levels with some very specific tools around how do we focus a reteach, to Superintendent Gall's point, that doesn't take us off pacing for weeks on end, but for a day or two or built in as a quick warm-up at the end or at the beginning of every lesson that is very specific to actual student needs And in Eureka, we're even able to target that to those student needs that may not come up in a future module, but that students haven't yet mastered the learning in. So principals walked out with some very tangible tools and practice that they can take back and use directly with teachers.
Okay, thank you. Director Jenkins had a question.
And speaking to a couple of things that you guys have mentioned, and I know we're not talking about PDs yet, the acceptance of PDs, I mean, I know we've heard criticism of the variations of them, and we've improved on that this year. I pay thousands of dollars myself for professional coaching for my profession because I see the value in it. And to hear that we've got teachers that are leaning into the coaching that is provided for free from the district is amazing. I wish more people would take advantage of it. But you mentioned the PDs and the hesitancy of maybe folks to adopt the things they're learning or to come to them with open mind. How are you seeing that play out in, I mean, could we say we're seeing it play out here? And how can we potentially help with that, the staff getting what they need?
I'm gonna shift over to Carol and Liz.
So I have a whole presentation to talk about the PD strategy and how we're embedding coaching within the PD strategy, right? Because we all know you can go to professional development, have an amazing experience, be really inspired to take it back to your classroom. You go back to your classroom and the reality's hit.
Right, you never
Right.
get to trying it. Yeah.
That said, what we are seeing in the data in PD has shown a consistent and constant uptick throughout all the 6 PD days we've had so far of positive reactions from teachers. What we were studying was how teachers felt about PD, right? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel like it was relevant to your craft? And that data was what we were using as the primary data set for a long time on planning PD. We've made a shift now to say that data is a piece of it. The other really important piece is, did it help? Right? What does it look like in practice? And so what we've done is make 2 sort of intentional shifts, and I can describe it more in detail in a minute. But one being, what are you going to take away from this, right? So you go to professional development and you say, I took this nugget. We capture all of those pieces of information to summarize for our district team. These are the big takeaways. These are how we can lean in and support schools like Adams with the individual kind of takeaways that their teachers had. We work with school level coaches through the professional development that we give our instructional coaching team to learn those takeaways that were given from PD so that they can implement them at the site level. And then we also kind of use that trend data towards planning future PD, right? Saying if these were the takeaways, how do we move forward in ensuring that our PD meets any additional needs that come up? Then we wrap all of that through the coaching system that says if these are the takeaways, what do we actually see when we go into classrooms? So again, we can talk more about this in a minute, but our coaching system has shifted from in the fall, us having a few schools that have tight coaching systems, right? We were really fortunate with the IE partnership to get some of this work off the ground quickly, but we've shifted to, as of today, actually I checked, 100% of our schools use either KickUp, which is a coaching platform, or the IE platform. We had over 1,300 classroom walkthroughs in the last 9 weeks. So that is kind of how we're starting to capture, is PD actually landing? Because these pieces put together give us a better holistic picture of, one, did you like what you learned? Did you get something from what you're learning that you can put into practice? And then in practice, do we see that learning show up, or do we either need to pivot our PD strategy or pivot our coaching strategy to make sure that it's actually landing with kids in the classroom?
That steals all the thunder of the next.
Don't worry, nope.
I got
a lot more.
I'm excited to hear more of the thunder.
Okay.
Yeah.
It fits into this slight reorg that we did as well, which was, if what we do is teaching and learning, I have to have multiple chiefs that are running that point. I can't just have one idea that then plays trickle down to a couple other people to a couple other people. What we're trying to do in coaching, and I think this needs to be really clear, because I know that there's still a lot of challenges in the buildings on whether or not what's the difference between a master agreement and an employee handbook. If the number one way to student achievement is access to high quality instruction, every ounce of this district is in ensuring that teachers feel and are supported and their practice continually improves. If you are the strongest teacher in the district, please go help the classroom that next to you that might not be the strongest. We have done the model classrooms, we are building out the teachers, coaching teachers. Every ounce of what we do is instructional. And yet there is still a lot of noise because some people love wonders and some people hate wonders. Some people think Eureka is good and some people want to memorize times tables again. Those are just tools of which we have limited amounts that we can provide. There are only a limited number of things that we can support centrally for 50-plus schools to be able to utilize. And yes, we have a regular way that we review them, such that when Eureka is up for review again, we certainly want people to tell us what isn't working for that. But while we have a tool, let's use the tool. Implementation with fidelity of the tools that you have, particularly for those challenge points that you saw, will get you gains much faster than saying that a different company's math curriculum is better than another's. We moved from, what was it, Galileo was our first interim assessment when I got here in 22, and we're at STAR now. And then some people say, why are you not an NWEA? As long as the correlation is near 80%, then we're fine. So sometimes let's stick with the plan and see if it works. And I appreciate the plan that Liz and Carol have brought to bear on the academic side.
Yeah, I think just to add on, I think with the walkthroughs that follow our professional learning cycles, it also informs our K-12 strategy, right? So we are able to see what is the learning needed for leaders, for teachers, based on what's landing at the classroom level, and it really does create a tighter and tighter cycle. And I think in those walkthroughs to building a learning culture, more and more we're seeing that become a great opportunity where teachers are coming down the hall and saying, can we have some feedback? What did you see? I'd love to hear more. Debriefing with leaders. So I do feel like there's a culture shift happening slowly and surely around that opening doors, I think, to one another.
Dr. Nelson.
Yeah, I have two questions that you may not know off the top of your head and may need to get back to me. I was wondering how far off we still are from like pre-COVID. Not that that's where we want to land, but just to get a sense of how far are we still. So just if you remember what the percent on grade level was before COVID hit for the district in ELA and
I
math.
can pull up those specific numbers, I'll send them with the rest of the package, but we are right at, because we're at the same place where we ended last year, we're right at, well, let me caveat this, because if I take the CMAS score and then correlate it to the, if I take the STAR score and then correlate it to the CMAS score, ELA we're right at pre-COVID, math we're slightly below, because we weren't using STAR pre-COVID, so we have to do a little bit of a conversion. But I can send you the exacts.
Okay.
from
And yeah, I
CMAS.
understand we were using a different testing system, but we were still tracking what percent of kids were on grade level.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
it
So
should,
slightly above now in ELA, slightly
Okay.
below in math.
so still work to do. And then my other question, just for my own clarity, when we say that 33% of kids last winter were on track in math, and now it's 32.6. Last year it would have been third graders, now they're fourth graders. So do you look at, if you were on track last year, you're probably still on track this year, or do we see movement of kids coming down and kids coming up? Or is it pretty much like the same group of kids are staying on track?
We do monitor that, yeah, and it is pretty stable. Clearly, last year, closer to the border, you're gonna have a little bit of bounce. But generally, those that are well within a performance band
We'll just
are staying in that performance band.
So it really is focusing on getting that more than a year's worth of growth to reach more kids.
That's
And
correct.
Okay,
that's all I had.
thank you. So we do have a second part of the presentation. So what I would summarize from what we heard is the intent of this board is to focus on improving academic outcomes for our kids. That's the board priority, that's on the wall, and that is through delivery of the best quality instruction in each and every single classroom. And the professional development that we are going to talk about is also going to be further evidence that we are invested in that high quality instruction in our classroom. But some of it is student engagement as well. If that perception is not there. We don't have some teeth associated with that. And that's what Superintendent Gall was talking about, whether we as a board have to look at some policy as similar to mandatory summer school or something along the line, middle school. We already talked about, we got to have a little bit more teeth to the middle school program where students cannot get a series of F but still move on from grade level to grade level. So that's something that the board can consider in future spring meetings, so we can equip our staff and also let our students know that this accountability is two ways. It's not only that we are holding the district admin, the principals, and our staff for the delivery of high quality instruction, but we also need students to come prepared to absorb that high quality instruction that is being delivered. I'll send it back to you, Dr. K, for the rest of the presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's still afternoon. Valerie Skates, and I brought with me Chris Brandt, Director of Student Engagement. So we can tell you about Panorama and how students are thinking and feeling about their learning. So this is where we bring student voice into this part of the picture here with our data. And so we specifically picked these topics to highlight: the self-efficacy measures, learning strategies, and student engagement. And as you can see with our response rates, we continue to have strong participation in this survey. So interestingly enough, this self-efficacy measure, last time I came before the board, I said, well, we have our greatest increases in this measure. And then that's not so much happening right now. And I think some of there's a few things happening. One, definitely an opportunity for strategy and listening to students on how they're feeling about their learning and what we can do with that. At the same time, those dotted lines represent changes in some of the questions. So Panorama did do some updates to their questions to make sure that they were readable, that they were getting us what the question was really trying to get at. And so I think this had come up before too, like how much are students really understanding the questions, and so they made improvements on that. So it's not a direct measure. Some of the questions have been updated, and so that's why you see the dotted line there. So that's where we are with self-efficacy right now. And that is measuring how much students believe they can succeed in achieving academic outcomes. And as I've mentioned before, if you want to see specific questions, those are on the D11 Panorama site, and that's where you can find those. Learning strategies, this is one where it's a straight, there's no dotted line. They didn't have any changes in this category, but it's measuring, students are telling us how well they use strategies to manage their own learning in class. And so mostly flat here, but we definitely saw where with our upper grades 9 through 12, we have some opportunities for growth there. And in the engagement measures, students are telling us how attentive and invested they are in their classes and in school. And this is where we saw some changes again with the readability, but we held steady in the secondary reporting with that. And so that readability update has had a varying levels of impact. So across the board, they're telling us they're seeing around a 2% to 8% impact on those scores, with self-efficacy actually being the one they saw probably the biggest difference in. So that also explains some of that part. And then I'm actually going to turn it to Chris for this slide, and then I'll come back.
Sure. We just reached out to several schools just to kind of see the impact this year and some of the highlights on some of the significant growth. Fremont and Sabin both had some very strong scores in some of the very specific indicators, and so we reached out, and as you can see, some of the other aspects that we've already talked about tonight, Fremont's indicated that the IE work is really having a significant impact on just their ability to support students and seeing that self-management of students and the adult skills and how they're able to implement the strategies from IE and how that translates down to the student level. Fremont also is focusing on teaming throughout the building in some of their more specials classrooms. And so really just trying to be more focused and dialed in on that work as well. And then Sabin, a lot of their kind of screaming about their success was around the cell phone policy. Just really seeing that student sense of belonging, they're interacting more with one another and seeing a positive increase with the students in terms of not being on devices, and when they are, being very intentional about the use of that as directed by the teachers and the adults in the classroom.
The other bright spot with that is post-COVID, we saw a sense of belonging being an area that we really needed to work on. And the greatest increases for grades 6 through 12 were in that category this time. So that is another just overall bright spot. I think the other thing that is good news, on our January 6th PD day, we saw a lot of teachers engaging in really looking at this data and then looking at strategies. What can they do in their classroom to help students who might need extra support with that student agency and student teaming. And so that was something that we, a lot of time, well, in the past, most of our training has been with school counselors, school administrators, but we were able to bring it down to the teacher level. And there were a lot of positive reports with that. We were able to partner academics and student engagement specialists. And so Jennifer Chappell actually sat in on the teacher session, and she's working on another project right now, or she would have been here to share, but she did tell me that teachers were able to discuss and teach each other strategies that they could use in the classroom based on this data and what they were seeing for their specific class needs. They also found the session very informative and directly applicable to their work, and they were excited to have some pre-built concrete strategies to address specific data points. So that is also more to come on PD, but January 6th we saw a lot of teachers engaged in MIS2 work, the culture and engagement with a focus on student agency. And so all of these results are pre that date, and so my hope is, again, timing of year and then with some of the PD we're providing, that we're gonna see some different results at the end of the year. That's my last one.
Do you just want to talk a little bit about how we hope to be able to measure, peak experiences and these other new initiatives that we're rolling out in response to a continued disconnection between school and learning from a student perspective?
Right. Bringing in that relevant learning through peak experiences, through that continuum of career-connected learning is something that we're working on at all levels and through Future Center work. And so that's another area where we have some strategy in place where we will see student engagement increase as they see that real world application. We know when they get to go out on the construction site at Coronado, that they're very engaged. We hear it from students when they have the opportunity to do some learning outside of the classroom. And so when we have that opportunity to expose them to different opportunities and explore and have those experiences, then we see student engagement go up and we see achievement go up. And so that's the other part. As we look, how are we measuring those things? Some of that is work with the CTE department. Some of that we're still developing, and we will get there, of how are we going to show those connections and correlations with student engagement.
Okay. You're done with your presentation?
Yes.
Just this last slide, I don't know if you wanted to speak here or
It kind of bridges to the next.
Yeah.
So why don't we take panorama questions and then we can use this to switch the deck.
Okay, Director Nelson.
What is teaming? On that
Teaming
Fremont,
is-
it said that their teaming makes learning and engagement more feasible.
So, just kind of that classroom teaming of, group dynamics and structuring a learning environment in a way that, you're using intentionally students that might be more advanced with those that might need extra supports and kind of building that cooperative learning environment.
So the students.
That's not teaming,
And
that's peer
there's-
coaching.
They're specifically referencing the instructional empowerment teaming. Fremont is in their second year. So it's using those IE structures to ensure that we're increasing student agency and students are actively engaging with each other to bring learning levels up.
Tasks that
So you're not saying.
require them to work together.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, in tasks that are interdependent and require them to work together to complete it. So it's not for kids sitting at a table and looks like they might be teaming, but the task itself actually requires students to work as a team to complete it successfully.
And does that fall, but does that fall in with the Kagan strategies with cooperative learning? Or, we seem to be recycling. How is it different?
Isn't Kagan more like,
That's engagement strategy.
yeah, an engagement strategy of like,
It
hey,
isn't,
we're gonna do some jumping jacks quick to re-engage the kids versus you're talking about like group work, the kids.
Around
Doing-
around a problem, for example, like take this text and as a group analyze why did the protagonist act in this way and what evidence do you find in the passage to support your answer, and the kids may, right, like then they'll have different roles on the team. There might as a facilitator, right, a timekeeper, but they're all engaging around a rigorous grade level task, right, to solve a problem in many cases, right, or it's not always a problem, but that's an example.
That's helpful to understand that there's like a specific identified role, because my concern would be you're gonna have kids that are not really putting in very much effort or they're struggling, and so then you have other kids that are doing more of the work. But I assume if you have identified roles, you're rotating
That really
those
helps,
roles.
exactly.
And so that would sort of help alleviate some of that.
The balance of voice,
Yeah.
and kids have a different opportunity to lean into the conversation in a different way or manage the group in a different way.
Okay.
You might be familiar with this.
Yes.
This is,
Okay.
yeah, one of the.
Thank you. I
Explains
wasn't
it,
sure
yeah.
if that was referring to the students or the staff working together. Thank you.
Dr. Jenkins.
So we had the the bright spots. I appreciate those. Do we have any frustration points or growth points that we saw from this that would maybe be worth sharing with the board that we could consider bettering?
We're still struggling in secondary. The disconnect between the pre-COVID and the post-COVID experience from a student perspective is not healed. Yes, the freshmen have now graduated, but now this year's freshmen were fourth or fifth graders during COVID. That bubble is gonna take a lot for folks, I think for students to really trust the system again. There was really a break of trust from a student's perspective on, it was, if you come to school on time and do your homework and work hard, everything will be okay. And then suddenly school disappears, and then a lot of kids figured out how to learn online, and very few school systems have robust online learning systems. So I think the kids are really trying to work their way through what that experience was. We're very confident in the future ready work that Val's leading on this idea of peak experiences, and that'll be coming to the board in some of the graduation requirement updates on how we've really kind of operationalized the graduate profile and how a peak experience every year, a student having a non-test way to demonstrate the value of their learning. Really getting kids to be invested again. That can be everything from the apprenticeships that we have to some of the long-standing great CTE or pathway work that we have, or just some of the things that are interesting to individual kids. Codifying that in a way that says it's part of your role in high school to participate in your learning, which actually goes to Director Nelson's question on the student teaming or agency. We've seen nothing but all kids rise up from that happening. We're not seeing the more advanced learners slow their learning down. all learners are accelerating in those pods, and we'll invite board members if they want to come see some of the model classrooms on it. It's really just great to see these kids switch up roles and who's leading and who's note-taking and who's following. And when the kids are doing the lift, the cognitive lift, it frees the teacher to get to the place where they're facilitating the learning and not having to direct it. That's where you get the 22 is too many, I need 12, because it's very hard to differentiate across. But we're seeing very positive results in that, and we can slice it that way at the end of the year for the board as well, to give a slice of that data where we're seeing the strength of that occur.
Yeah, just want to remind the board, we have about a little over 6 minutes to wrap up this conversation.
To your point, Mr. Gall, one of the most transformative quotes I ever heard in a PD as a teacher was, "The kids should be going home more tired than us as a teacher." And when that finally clicked in, I was like, yes, how do I do that, right? Like, that was a huge piece. So if it's this team, Thomas, so if it's a piece of teaming or, right, because we all go home tired, right? But like, man, what a good goal to try to achieve. I think my biggest concern is the self-efficacy numbers. You know, I mean, just that drive or that grit or that sufficiency to go, I can do what it takes, right? I can do hard things. And I realize we've got all sorts of, programs capturing kids' hearts and all these things, and they're great. That is worrisome. As worrisome, on the emotional side as it is on some of our achievement side. But we got kids who think they can't do things in school. I mean, that's a tough one to solve. So something to keep eyes on, please.
The way that's reported, I actually have one of those questions pulled up because that spoke to me too. And the question they're asked is, how sure are you that you can do the hardest schoolwork that is given to you?
Hardest.
So, yeah,
Need to find
hardest, right? And so this is the high school response that I'm looking at. So when you see those percentages, it's the students that are saying very sure, extremely sure. So these are the kids that are really confident, and so, have that in mind as well. And then, so that's like the top third of our students are feeling very sure or extremely sure they can do the hardest work. About 40% are somewhat sure, and then about another 30% are either a little sure or not at all sure. And so, the question we're asking is the hardest work, and they're kind of
They're bands
spread,
of
yeah. And so, how do we build the skill and confidence that they can and feel better about that?
Okay, any other closing thoughts at this time? You guys have a couple more slides to get through for that, right?
Yeah, so just to double check, we are gonna get a copy of the panorama results in generalized?
They're on the website.
Yeah, okay.
And the nice thing about what they've provided us is the adjusted scores based on the change in the questions. And so you'll see that, like the true score, what was answered, and then adjusted based on what it was before.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys have to wrap up something?
No, we'll just go right into the other.
Oh, is this
This was a closing of what we were doing, which
Slides after
Okay.
this.
You had a question. Go ahead.
I have one point that I want to make about the teaming thing, and I want to make this point really quickly because of the clock, and I want to make this point really carefully. Because I want to say a few caveats up front. Number one, my teaching experience is at the college level, it's not K through 12, so I grant that. The approaches may need to be different. I also want to just strongly echo what Superintendent Gall said of when you have a strategy, you have to be making a good faith effort to implement it with fidelity, right? If you are constantly changing the direction you're going, you're not going to go anywhere. I get that as well. I would just really urge caution with the teaming thing because it cuts against everything that I think is true about how learning occurs, in so much as the way you ultimately are assessing these kids is not as a team. It's not as a group. You're giving them, a STAR test, or you're giving them a CMAS test or whatever. And I know full well this is the classic failing of group projects. It's very, very easy as a student to bait yourself into thinking that you know more than you do, because perceiving or supporting the work that someone else is doing is very, very much not the same thing as doing the work yourself. And it's exactly what Superintendent Gall said. You want to be shifting the burden onto the students to make sure they're the one doing the cognitive lift. It's exactly what Jason said. The students should be leaving class tired, feeling like they actually, put in a good 65 minutes or whatever of work. And so I don't know, I haven't been to a model classroom. I'm not up to date on exactly what IE looks like in real life. I don't teach at the K through 12 level. I just want to very cautiously say, I'd watch the data on that one carefully. Because I think that's a place where you could find yourself getting into trouble if you're not having students individually do a bunch of the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we're year 2 now into this. The data has been very strong. We'll, please, as you're visiting classrooms, we'll make sure to highlight for each one of the buildings that you own where you can see this, because it's not being described the way that it is felt in the classroom. It's falling into a group project conversation, and that's not what's happening. No children are ever asked to demonstrate the learning objective as a team. They are asked to demonstrate the learning objective individually. The conversations are happening in a way where kids are mulling with the question in a way that's allowing the advancement of the learning objective, but there is no one table is outperforming another table. Children are not measured by table, they are measured individually, and please come see it before it starts to take on this narrative that I'm sensing here, that we're making smart kids spend time with underperforming children. That's not what's happening. The entirety of the room is grappling with a problem in differentiated, tiered ways, of which all kids are moving forward. So.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, please, Carol.
So
We gotta move
I-
on.
No, this
I'll
is
be
important.
I'll be very quick.
Okay.
I think about, I hear what you're saying, and I think sometimes we think about group projects or kind of how the team works together. And I like to think like a sports analogy, right? If the teacher is hitting the volleyball and one kid hits it back, right? Often that's how we've seen traditional classrooms at the elementary level, right? One kid, we ask a question, we get a response. We ask a question. Well, while we're getting that response, we have 90-some% of the kids sitting, listening, right? We're hoping that they're engaged, but we actually don't have a way to capture that. What we see through teaming is that we hit the ball, the kids work on it collectively, but the response, what he was just saying around the accountability for the learning, is still measured at the individual level. To that exact point, what you were asking around, like, are we still measuring the individual kid? They're individually having to put the ball back, if that makes sense. There's a really beautiful graphic somewhere out there that we can show you as well that kind of highlights this idea. But I think just that's an easy way to think about where the lift shifts, is it's that we're trying to capture that middle space where we've hit the question to the kid and now we're only having one kid raise their hand to answer it. Or, best case scenario, we have 5 kids who put their hand up. But when you measure, and there's some really good studies on this that look at how much time actually a kid speaks in a whole day, right? And actually thinking about how do we make meaningful shifts to measuring that participation of the individual kid. So
Those are all the right questions. Great.
Yeah, on the
Happy.
response rate for the panorama survey is 80% comparable to where we've been? Are we seeing more families opting out, more families opting in? Has there been a change?
We're seeing more participation.
okay.
Director Art, did you have something?
I've just, I'll note for you all, in the future, the 2 pages that are in the appendix that show the percent of Black students at grade level in math and ELA and Hispanic percentages. When we compare those students to the district, it's not quite the same as looking at, say, a Black child versus a white child and realizing that the difference isn't just 7% or 10%, it's 20 and 25% differences. And lumping them all in minorities, I'm guessing the Asian numbers, which are 50% passing, are helping the Black numbers of 18% passing. It makes them look better. And we don't talk about that anymore. And so I hope we will continue to support students in a cultural way, and maybe we'll learn about that with professional development, I don't know. But I love that the bar is up here and everybody's growing, but they're still being left behind, especially if the numbers remain flat, so thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks for that observation. So thank you guys for that part of the presentation. So we will move on to the professional development. To the board members, you heard Superintendent Gall offer that invite to go and visit the model classroom. So if you are interested in those, should.
And we'll bring one of those schools as our program spotlight for February as well. So to really get you all to see and have the kids come in and kind of show what that looks like a little bit, to make sure everybody understands what we've been doing and how it's been working.
Perfect. Move on to the professional development.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Carol Fry. I'm our interim chief of coaching and development. And I'm really excited to go kind of after the data presentation, because I think that our professional development strategy sits in a really unique spot right now in our system. And what I mean by that is, you know, I believe, and I know that this is a shared value across our city and our system, that we have the absolute best teachers here in District 11, right? We have people that are working as hard as they possibly can in service of kids each and every day across all of our school sites. And we hold a simultaneous truth that 44% of our kids are reading on grade level. And what is so incredible about our investment in professional learning and coaching is that that sits in the in-between space, right? That is, how do we take people who are working as hard as they possibly can and invest in them, invest in giving them the skills and the training and the follow-up that they need to be highly successful in their classrooms. Because there is not a teacher out there that isn't invested in the outcomes that we produce for kids. And so our department gets the opportunity to connect that line for every teacher in our system. And so I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about kind of these three buckets of work. One, how is our professional learning and coaching strategy connected to our district UDIP? What are we learning about the data that we're getting? Like I mentioned before, the shifts in where the data is coming from. What are the insights that are being gained? And then with those insights and the mid-year data, what are the shifts that we're making? Right, we all have that tension point in our system and in our own work between what you named, Director Carey, of sticking with a strategy, right? We know that that works when we stick with something. And we want to be nimble enough that when the data is telling us something else, we can sort of say, these are the pivots we want to make really intentionally that stick to our larger strategy. So, and I just love that quote there, professional development is not a cost, it's an investment in the transformative power of education. We have made here in our system and at the board level such an investment in teacher development. I think it's such an incredible gift to teachers that we're going to invest in them in this way, and it's in service to what happens to kids every day, right? If we're committed to the guarantee of high quality instruction in every classroom, and we know we have teachers working as hard as they can, then this is the answer that can get us to ensuring high quality instruction for every kid. So this is a slide that you have seen before that really talks about our district's best first instruction strategy, right? What we are sticking with, what we are consistent with is ensuring best first instruction for every child, right? That's across subgroups, that's in every subject. And so you see there the BFI triangle in the middle, right? The connection between what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, and how we're engaging kids, right? That is still our number one strategy towards better outcomes for our students. How we're really changing and kind of, I would say, deepening that work this year is through the lens of these 8 additional professional development days, right? Really saying, hey, if we significantly invest in teacher development, what will the outcomes be? And then, like I named before, as we invest in teacher development, we have to shift our strategy around coaching to ensure that the great learning that's happening when they're out of the classroom, right, is coming back into the school, the context, and the classroom to make sure that those outcomes are landing for kids. Okay. Again, a familiar slide that you've seen, but I think this is important to just name how the different facets of our professional learning system come together. Because I think oftentimes when we're hearing feedback, right, in the system, we're only hearing it at 1 or 2 of these levels, right? And what I just want to call out is how many different layers of professional learning we're having for teachers. So I'm here tonight primarily to talk about our district strategy, right, which is the big top strategy, sticking with best first instruction, really deepening teacher content knowledge in their subject area, right, making sure that we have content level expertise going into our classrooms. But we know that our schools then build strategy under that to say, we're going to have this incredible learning in text first planning, and this is what we need to do to implement that at freedom, right? How do we take that learning to our own school? So they're building out their own professional development strategies. So 3 of our district days have been half days where schools get to sort of align to that district strategy of how am I bringing our school strategy to bear to produce kind of the outcomes that we're looking for in the district strategy. But then I think this other really important piece that we don't want to lose sight of is we also have an incredible opportunity for teachers to select PD that they feel that they need on their own. Right, so again, there's a tension and kind of a balance point that says we are heavily invested on our district strategy, right? Best first instruction, ensuring those opportunities for every child. And if you, teacher, are exceptionally interested in this incredible state level professional development, we have a vehicle and a mechanism for that too, right? We have our 2 additional PD days that folks are opting into, and I know of so many stories across our system of principals being able to help support sub-coverage and other ways to get teachers those opportunities as well. So, as I named, when we build out all of this professional learning, what we know that the research has said, there's an incredible study that looked at professional development across, I think, the last 20 years of learning and the investment when you think of every school system, right, and the cost of a PD day. Does it work, right? And what they found was it only works if there's an embedded mechanism for bringing that to life in the classroom. That when we go to conferences, we all feel excited, we feel like we want to come back and change the world, and then the world comes at us in our own environment. And again, this is to speak that I believe our teachers are working as hard as they possibly can, right? In that tension point between I got this great learning and now this is my challenge. These are my 3rd graders, these are my 9th graders. And so connecting those dots through coaching opportunities. And so this is the first year in the entire time that I've been in District 11, and to the best that I've understood, potentially in the history of District 11, that we've expanded the instructional coaching program. So in the past, we had instructional coaches at all of our elementaries. This year, we have instructional coaches at all of our middle schools, except for 2 who have a position that's unfilled. But we're working hard to solve that. And we have embedded teacher coaches who are part-time teachers, part-time coaches. So these are content expert teachers in our high schools leading the work at 3 of our 4 high schools. And then Mitchell has tripled down on the coaching strategy and has 3 full-time coaches supporting the Mitchell strategy.
Are the instructional coaches different than the TLCs?
They're part of the instructional coaches include the TLCs. So what I tried to do was really bring a strategy that says if you coach, we will centrally support you and train you and give you that training. So it doesn't matter if you're a middle school coach, that's what we call it, nomenclature. If you're an elementary school TLC, if you're a high school embedded coach, you belong to the instructional coaching family and you have access to the networks of training and support. And sort of a different lens that we've used this year is also saying coaching only works if coaching is effective. Right? I gave this example earlier this year. I said, can you think of a time when coaching really changed your life? Right? And almost everyone can think of an opportunity. And then I say, can you think of a time where you had a really bad coach? Right? And immediately there's chuckle and people say like, actually, yes, several times. Or maybe that's never been your experience. It certainly has been mine. But what I think we need to what we needed to increase our investment in is coaching our coaches. Really, we had these incredible people who also are working as hard as they possibly can. And they were getting PD. They were coming monthly or every other week, but we weren't embedding coaching on site with them. So we used the area network model through our area instructional coaches. We have 1 for every region, and their sole focus is to coach our coaches. So they come to PD monthly. We do PD every 2 weeks with our whole coaching team. But then our AICs take that back to the building and work on coaching alongside our coaches, watching our coaches, debriefing with our coaches, and really building the individual sort of needs of every school's coaching program. Okay. So I know I mentioned that we use several different metrics to measure the effectiveness of professional learning. And so what I want to highlight for you here are just a couple of the survey questions. So this is sort of our, I would say, tier 1 place where we get feedback from teachers on professional learning. We ask them, we say, how did it go at PD? And was the PD relevant? And what I think is really important to highlight here is we have consistently seen these scores above a 4 on every metric. Right? And so I think sometimes there's a conversation of, did this PD perfectly land for me? Like, maybe not perfectly, but across our system, what we're seeing is PD has been consistently landing on the aggregate since the first of this year, like since the start of the school year. And with some shifts that we've made between the first semester PD and the January 6th PD, I just want to call out there's a really significant shift in those numbers between how teachers felt PD was relevant in the first half of the year, while still positive has shifted to be more positive, feeling like they got skills-based learning that they felt like they could take back to their classroom right away. Again, we see a pretty significant shift in those scores. And then this is my favorite because I think this is really that opportunity for our folks to learn from each other. Felt like they saw a really significant increase in collaboration with their peers and being able to learn from one another. Our PD system this year has really been focused on trying to get collective groups of people who teach in similar ways or who teach similar skills together, because that's the opportunity they don't get in their schools. Right, in their schools, they have the amazing opportunity to be with their school team, and the 3rd grade teachers are together, or the 9th grade ELA teachers are together, but they don't always get that opportunity to learn from the other incredible 9th grade ELA teachers across our system. And so this is an opportunity for them to have that shared content, but also a chance to collaborate. Okay. I'm not going to read these 2 quotes, but I would love it if you would take a minute and just read. These are 2 pieces of teacher feedback, and then I'll share a little bit of what the story has been here. Okay, so the second way that we've been gathering data is really focused on that implementation standpoint, right? You've gone to PD, you said yes to the scores in our PD survey, but how are you going to take that back to the classroom? What's the actual takeaway for you? And so the first quote here represents an instructional coach who had a teacher attend what we've considered sort of our new teacher support PD, right? We've had a really targeted approach to saying, if you need more support, right? If the tier 1 strategy of the district is not yet ready, you're not ready yet for that, what would it look like for us to get you targeted PD? These are groups of 5 to 10 teachers across our 1,800 teachers, but they get sort of that small group learning environment to really meet their needs. And you can see here, we had a teacher go to one of these sessions, and the teachers self-select. They say, I really think this is something that I need. And they immediately came back and said, I'm going to work on these 2 procedures in the classroom. And this coach was so excited to tell us, she did it and it worked. It's landing in the classroom. And we were able to measure the implementation of that. And so I think that's a really good sort of full picture of how PD, how teachers experience PD, how they then work with their coach, and then how we see the impact for kids. And then the second one is really a teacher who had access to the ongoing mathematics support. I know we talked about sort of where that math data is right now and our huge focus on ensuring high quality math instruction. And again, there's sort of a multifaceted need there, right? So this was an individual who has not yet had all of the Eureka training, right? Because they came into our program, they're a brand new teacher, right? And they were able, and I'm going to double check that because I actually had 2 quotes in here about Eureka PD. So I won't say that it's a new teacher because I had 2, but somebody that has had access to this type of training and then felt like they learned to use a part of that curriculum, to your point around fidelity, and then they were able to do that. And we emailed this individual and said, would you be comfortable with us sharing this at a board meeting? We won't share your name. And they said, yes, and can you tell them that we used it and it worked? And I just thought, what a neat opportunity to showcase that teachers are excited about landing the PD, right? They want this success in the classroom too, which is why I think the PD coaching strategy is such an exciting place for us to be as a system. Okay. And then this is just another metric that I think is really important, and it speaks to that idea around investment. So this is a slide that indicates how many course completers we have. So essentially you go to PD, you have gone to a PD session, you're a course completer, okay? As a system, we've been consistently in the 20,000 PD course completers a year, right? So that might be one teacher goes to 5 or whatever this looks like, right? But you can sort of see where we've been as an investment. Look at where we are, and that's just right now. So we're approaching 40,000 professional learning sessions for teachers in our system, and we still have 2 PD days to go. So we're on track to have made more than a double increase in the professional development across our system. Upcoming PD days. So we have 2 PD days left. Like I said, if you are tracking, the full days are there at the bottom, and the 3 half days are listed there on the right. We've made a huge investment in professional development, and these days that we have coming up are a continued focus on best first instruction. And so I think that you can see here, we have schools and leaders who are scoped through text first planning or mathematics, again, grounded in our content focused professional learning strategy, which is if you teach in these contents, how do we get you the best possible professional learning? I know in the past there's been some questions around, is it our folks who are teaching that professional development? Is it contractors? How are we doing that? And we're really pleased at this point to say it's a true mix, that we have really leveraged some contracts that we've had to train our team to have the skills to lead PD in this way and to really be able to engage the connection between great content and then the D11 experience so that we can connect with people with their individual needs. And lastly, what does that mean for what's coming up, right? What are the shifts that we're going to make as a result of, like I said, that mid-year data, but also just sticking with what is our upcoming strategy? So most importantly, it's continuing PD at this pace, right? We are at double the rate of previous years. We're gonna stay committed to that strategy. We are also going to think about the opportunities within our core strategy that are still leaving a few things out. For example, we have learned throughout the course of this year to the point of Eureka data, that there has not been a consistent strategy up until this point to ensure that long-term subs are trained in our content, right? That just wasn't something that we had previously caught. We have corrected that and made an assurance to principals and to teachers that if you have a long-term sub, we're committed to their professional development just like everybody else. Because if that's your child in that classroom, we're still making that guarantee that you're gonna have access to high-quality instruction. The second thing that we've done is really focus on this implementation follow-up. How do we take what you've learned and ensure that it's landing in your classroom? And if it's not landing in your classroom, how do we close the loop to get you the resources that you need? The other thing that I would just say here that has been a really powerful shift is, sometimes we ask the question of, why do teachers not go to PD, right? Sometimes that's been a question that we've asked is how many people don't come and why not? Well, we've never asked them. If you can believe that, we've just said, 300 people didn't come. I think it's because of this, and we've kind of moved on, right? And not just here in District 11, I think that's a strategy that we've used just kind of by chance. We have a lot of things that we track. We've been focused in the coaching and development office on asking every question that we can. So how do we reach out to those folks? So if you did not attend a district PD day, you're getting an email and a survey follow-up to find out more. If you chose not to attend because we didn't meet your needs, we want to know that, right? Because we want to be able to make sure that PD meets your needs. If you didn't attend because you made a choice between this or that, we want to know that because maybe there's something for the calendar committee to be learned out of that data, right? We're just constantly thinking about how do we get teacher voice back into the PD system in a way that shapes and informs ensuring outcomes for kids, right? Because all of our learning is in service to helping that teacher meet the needs of the kids in the classroom. And so if we're missing any demographic, right, even 10 people, 20 people, it's 10 people too many. And we just want to be committed to that. Like I said, they're seeking additional feedback. I have been on a listening tour of the district. Every survey response that comes in on professional development, I read line by line, and our team reads, and our content facilitators, and we seek to learn more. So if you wrote, I just don't know, this training didn't land for me, I've been reaching out to those folks via email. I've been going to schools and meeting with people, teams of people, to try to say, tell us more. We're committed to adult learning in District 11. We're deeply committed. And if we're not meeting the mark, we want to know that. And we want to bring teachers that have maybe thought, this isn't going to meet my needs, or I went to PD a couple years back and it wasn't really what I'm looking for. We want to bring those people back to the table to say all means all, right? We need to make sure that we're hearing even from those voices to get it to land. And what I will also say here is, we have 1,800 teachers. Meeting all 1,800 individual needs on a given PD day is an enormous task. That said, I'm not afraid of that task. We're not shying away from it. And if it's not meeting a specific teacher's need, like I said, reach out, tell us, talk to your principal. I've gone to schools and spoken to staffs, like whatever we can do. But we are doing the action steps that we are planning off of our teacher data. And so the more voice in the system is helpful to us as we think about planning. So we're really leaning into those conversations. And like I said, all of that feedback comes to a strategy of what do we do now, right? Knowing that we're holding simultaneous truths of, did PD not land? what's going on, and also 40% of our kids reading on grade level, right? We have to constantly be keeping that tension to be a learning culture. So with that, I would love to answer questions about sort of about how professional development and coaching are coming together, or any other questions that you have.
Thank you. Right, Hafley.
I have a few. One you already answered, and that was how often do we use our own staff to present PD, so thanks for hitting that one. Do you find that teachers want to choose their own PD more? Is that even an option for them? And if so, how often is that an opportunity that's provided to them?
We have a couple of different mechanisms for teachers to pick their own PD. One is what I mentioned on those PD days, like how are teachers self-selecting. I was at Coronado speaking to the team up there, and they have a really great way of using those PD days and teachers kind of opting into additional PD. We've also pivoted on some of the district PD to offer more voice and agency for teachers to identify, this is my challenge, this is how I want to solve it. And we're playing in that tension point of trying to ensure too that we have a continuity of strategy, which says we want to make sure that everyone has this level of training. And so we kind of live in that balance between ensuring MIS1 content instruction for ELA and math specifically, and creating space for voice for teachers to say, this is what I really want to do.
So you're providing PD that doesn't necessarily apply to a specific teacher, or is the idea behind that to create more of a well-rounded teacher? As opposed to, as a social studies teacher, I probably don't need a math PD.
Yes, very much so in alignment with the content that you teach. Social studies is a great example.
We're not asking social studies teachers to go to Eureka PD.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
But we are asking social studies teachers to go to text first planning. And we're asking science teachers to go to math PD. Because we believe very strongly that we're not just about tested subjects. And if I can hammer home some of the math in science and some of the reading in ELA and social studies, and or even more, I mean, you can keep adding on to that. But no, we don't ask out of content to go to places that we don't think there's relevancy. We work very hard to explain that relevancy. I can't tell you that that's always well received.
Sure.
There will be people who say, I don't believe I need text first planning. That's the English department's job. But I think you know particularly well that half of it was understanding the paragraph or the book or the passage that you asked them to read the night before.
So if I'm still in the classroom and I'm going to PD and I've already taken PDA, will I need to go back and take PDA over and over again? Or if I check that box and I can move on?
I
Speak a little to the.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for social studies, for example, we're doing text first planning, but with DBQs, right? So
Right.
document-based questioning. And so there's a whole series built in, and so it builds over time. So that is what social studies teachers are really deeply engaging in alignment to the ELA team that's really deeply in text first planning.
Okay.
But looking at, right, literary.
Have there been people who feel like they've had repeat PD? Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
There's 1,800 certified staff in the district. This is a monumental movement going forward. I will say the other thing that Carol actually brings in from her work with Sherry last year as a principal was when MGPs didn't meet a certain number at Monroe, there was very specific PD. So you might say, I've had that PD, but we're saying, David just said you have a 30 growth percentile for your mid-year data. Let's take a look at what did or didn't take in the PD you've gotten before. So it's not just, I think the real thing we're trying to share with the board and the community is PD is no longer sit and get. It might start still some that way, but PD isn't complete until it's demonstrated then as part of the profession of our best first instruction, right? We want to close that gap. If we give you this tool, show us how it's working and show us how it's not working of how we can improve the tool. Not just I lasted through a half or a full day PD and then the box is checked. And I don't accuse people of that. It's hard to get it right. There's an infinite level of differentiation required in any system. We've put together what we believe is a very thoughtful, particularly on the things that we've done in ELA, and you see the results of it. The text first planning, when introduced a year and a half ago, literally had jaws dropping from the building leaders of I can't believe I haven't been getting to this in my own building level conversations. Now, and this question about who teaches the PD, we have been graduating away from externals to internals because now we know that and how to do that and teach it to ourselves. So when we bring in a new topic, we normally bring in somebody external because we can't teach what we don't know yet. And then we ask them to train us as trainers to be able to push ourselves away from both the very costly and normally is slightly distant. Like there's only so many times you can say like, boy, the roads were really sketchy on my drive in from the airport before you lose the audience and they go, oh, you don't live here, right? So we're working on this.
Okay, two very quick ones. The first one is, you mentioned grade levels, ability to collaborate ninth grade to ninth grade. What about high school to middle school teachers? So the idea that middle school teachers and high school teachers are meeting to make sure that kids are getting what they need in order to be able to be successful in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. In specifically, a great example of that is how we're using the accelerated agency in like our VAPA programming that goes 6-12. And so we're having a lot of opportunities for vertical collaboration. And in fact, I know we talked a little bit about IE earlier, but one of the other accelerated cohorts for IE is in math in high school. And while it doesn't answer the question of the vertical 6-8, we saw some really bright spots in the data at Coronado, specifically in our IE math classrooms.
Coronado is just killing it. Not that I'm biased. And finally,
All the schools have really taken to the new PD model very well, all the schools. So we're getting very positive feedback from existing staff and new staff, and particularly from the principals are saying the follow-up, the fact that now the academic office doesn't just deliver PD, but they also roam around and check to make sure it's sticking and find out why it didn't stick, has really helped. A principal, as you know, just doesn't have the time to be 100% instructional.
Right.
They strive to be, but there's always a parent, there's always an expired chocolate milk, and there's always a late bus. So this way of activating central office to be school-based is really just the final iteration of the network area superintendent model that we brought in. Because the areas are driving where they know that the central office needs to go support.
okay. And then finally, you mentioned the implementation for long-term subs. What exactly is that? How can they expect to be?
They're activated through their school team, so long-term subs are activated through their TLC or instructional coach who provides the sort of on-site support, and then they work with the academics team to build specialized PD based on the needs of the long-term sub. So an example is we tapped all of the long-term subs on the southeast side of town who were working right before the winter holiday, pulled them all together and did a one-stop shop for all of our curricular programs and sort of the nuts and bolts of those things, and then connected that through TLC networks, because they were elementary, so that they could activate that in their buildings.
Okay. I know that Linda and Hillary and Vincent and Yune are just rocking it, so I want to make sure they got mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, Director Jenkins?
Not a question, just a comment. I mean, we know that education is changing. We know that even just how, as we have these different generations of people growing up, I mean, I'm in my second career and I'm tail end of a millennial, zennial, whatever you call this. And I just know that we have to be shifting and adapting to the fact that, you know, while we love having those 30+ year teachers in our district, I think moving forward, we see that there's going to be fewer and fewer of them happening across the country, especially here with, you know, having spouses stationed here for maybe 4 years at a time or something like that. So all that to say, having the PD for the folks that are here, whether they're new and are saying, I'm gonna do this for the next 5 to 10 years and then I get an itch to go try some other career, great, we'll support you and build you and make you successful here. Or the military folks that are here because their spouse is here, and great, we'll support you for the 2, 3, 4 years you're here and thank you for your time in D11. This is much needed. And whether you're new or old, it sounds like it's still beneficial. And so we talked about earlier piece of the coaching of, you know, just saying, okay, whether you're a 2-year teacher or a 20-year teacher, please, you know, come to these with open mind. You're giving the time for them to actually implement what they're learning. And that's, I think, super helpful because, like you said, you know, you go back to change the world and the world smacks you in the face and you just go, oh, maybe next year. So that's very helpful to hear. But yeah, I think we are pivoting in a way that we need to with the just changing dynamics of the education workforce. And so, thank you.
Director Nelson, and I'll come to you, Director Nelson.
I've heard feedback, and I actually directed them to you, Dr. Fry, to reach out on how some of the strategies maybe need to be tweaked for lower levels of like K through 2, and just, I don't know, you already know what I'm talking about. If the person reached out to you, it was sort of like through another individual, and I just said, hey, Fry loves to hear feedback.
Yes.
And just that we do want to hear from our staff what is working, what's not working, and if you find that you're being coached on something that you're not sure how to implement it at your grade level, or you just need some help, and making sure that our principals are also aware that, like, if they're hearing that from their staff, to bring in that coach or tap you guys, and that it isn't, this is what we're doing, because we want to help, and so it is not at all like just, sorry, this is what we're doing. That's not the culture we're trying to strive for. So just communicating that to leadership, because I've heard that that was kind of being conveyed.
Yes, please connect those folks with me. The other thing that I would say there is what you named around principals serving kind of in that middle space to be listeners to what the needs of their individual staff are. We've made really specific communication channels from our office to school leaders to seek that feedback from principals too, and then have made some listening tour decisions to go to schools and speak to groups of people too, when that felt like the best way to sort of get that feedback.
And then I had one more thing, but it was to come back to a data request. So just before
Come
we
back
end,
at what?
to a data request. So
Okay.
before we end the meeting.
Right, right.
Thank you. I appreciate the coaching and coaching of coaches and all of that. That sounds like a great way to reinforce and inform our staff. In reference to the earlier comments about the differences between ethnicities or races and how our students are achieving, there could be cultural issues there, linguistic issues, obviously, for some of our Hispanic students. And I know we have CLDE teachers, the culturally, linguistically diverse education teachers. But beyond just that certification, are there trainings that help inform how teachers approach some of these students who are apparently struggling?
Yes. And I love the connection to what you said earlier about how are we activating coaches and coaches of coaches. So we've, in addition to the training, so at the last January 6th PD Day, another one of the really popular sessions that was attended is around how to engage students who are not traditional learners perhaps. Additionally, the CLDE and our GT groups got specialized PD, and our SPED group actually got specialized PD at that time. So they have that opportunity built in, that sometimes they're with content-based like teams, but sometimes they're with their own teams, sort of learning those skills. But we've also decided this year to really increase our efforts towards coaching coaches on what to look for, what to think about when ensuring that every kid is engaged in that classroom. So through the Bueno Center, which is a team up from Denver that does work around engaging multilingual learners in the classroom, they've been able to support some of our coaches in the implementation of those strategies in the classroom.
Is the list for every one of our PD days on the webpage? Is it available?
Like the dates of those
Just
things.
like all the PD that we did on January 6th, is there a place where board
Yes.
members can find that?
See those sessions, yes.
Yeah, let's send that link. We'll put it in the Mars report so you can see everything that's offered, Director. We normally highlight the largest settings, but to be able to share what everyone has available.
Thank you.
Any further questions at this time? Right, Gary.
I'm gonna excuse myself to get
Okay.
over to Dory.
Yep.
Thank you all. See you there.
See you there.
See you.
Yeah, but let's wrap this up.
Yep, I'll be
Yep.
fast. I loved all of this, basically. Making PD differentiated, making it of immediate practical use, emphasis on supports for new instructors, actually circling back with teachers and seeing, did you have value in this, PD? If you didn't come, what was the reason? What is the niche that we're failing to fill? And then going and closing the loop further by saying, is this actually going into the classroom? That is all wonderful. My only question is, and I know the timescales make this quite awkward, do you have any ability to go and check, does the PD affect student outcomes down the road? I know that Dr. Colicky mentioned, I don't remember exactly the two variables, but there was a decent correlation, something about Eureka uptick and then something about the growth percentages that they were seeing. Do you have any ability to look at some of the PD data in that way? And could you speak to that if that's something you're trying to do?
Absolutely, we do that. So anytime, like he spoke to on, for example, the Eureka module assessments, right? Every time we look at the assessment data, which is that real-time data from the classroom, we're tracking that against what PD efforts have happened in Eureka, what coaching efforts have happened in Eureka, and sort of is there connection there between how kids are doing. And so we have some bright spot examples of where that's working well for us. And then we have some challenge specifically on math, where folks have opted into an ELA strand at the elementary level as a more primary focus. And while that strategy is very much working for us, we aren't investing that same amount of time in professional development yet in math. And I think that's some of the places where we have some opportunity down the road. Yeah, great.
Dr. Bankus, you had a question? No. Okay. Are you done, Dr. Kay?
Yeah.
You're done. Okay. See, you will make that request at a board meeting later on, is that what you said?
No, I want to bring it up now. It's
Okay.
to circle back on Director Ott's point of the differences in minority outcomes. I remember when I came on the board for a couple of years, we saw larger gaps in FRL than anything else. And so thank you for Director Ott for pointing out that that's not what we're seeing right now. And so I guess I just wonder, could we see some data? Because in my mind, it's the lower socioeconomic, we know those students come in further behind into kindergarten. And that they don't have the fluency of language or the reading skills. And so could we sort of like put side by side our demographics of FRL with the minority, and to just help me understand, is it more of a socioeconomic problem like I have thought for a couple of years based on our data, or is there something else there? So is that possible to with that side by side?
So Dr. K, I mean, if that is something that can be provided at a later time to the board, Nicole isn't here, but you can work with Nicole, and in that monthly report that the board gets, that can happen at that time as well. Is there anything that you want to share in that regard at this time?
No, in the past, we did do a comparison of that, and in the past, FRL has had a larger impact than ethnicity. There's some noise in FRL reporting now from lunch legislation. But yeah, we can definitely run those side by side and do a little bit. I can rerun that analysis. I think it'd be good. It was prior to the legislation, so it'd be good to check again.
Okay. And I almost wonder if we should actually include it in the deck so that we can refer back to it later, or that the public can see that, our minority groups have, whether or not there is higher FRL in those subpopulations or not, and just to have the public be able to access that as well.
Okay.
I think there was some talk, and I'm trying to recall the conversation that Nicole mentioned in one of the agenda setting meetings. All the monthly reports that the board get is being made available to the public as well.
Okay.
So.
Well, I still would like it to be with this, because this is the similar content period.
I'm just mentioning that it's out
Okay.
of transparency, not specifically in reference to this.
That's a good point.
request.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this time? If not, a couple of quick points that I want to make to the board. The board is aware of a student expulsion issue that we briefly talked about last week. The board will receive those packets in the email from Deb Jenkins. So you need to independently review those packets at your convenience at home. I think it may circle back to the board next week, but we don't have time to review that at the board meeting itself or an executive session. You just need to take the time. I will work with the Deb Jenkins, and she will deliver those packets to you probably by Friday of this week, so you have time to review that information. And the last thing is, I would be remiss if I don't thank Ms. Katrina again. Thank you for stepping in. Ms. Olson is under the weather and she was kind enough to step in. So thank you, appreciate it. And 6 o'clock at Doherty if you guys plan on being there.